What's up, everybody? It's Realistic with Realistic Productions doing another tutorial for SoundOracle.net. And in this video, I'm going to be going over kind of a hot topic that's been really a big buzz in recent years, really for a long time, but lately it's been even bigger due to Mix by Ali doing this technique a lot and making it really popular amongst the hip-hop and R&B and pop community a little bit more. A lot of engineers, including myself, swear by this, and it's mixing in mono. This is an age-old classic trick that really works. And it's definitely something that I think can save a lot of mixes. I think it can really show you a lot of problem areas. And this might be the little missing piece. If you're not already doing this, this might be the missing piece that you need that can really just set your mixes to the next level. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over some different reasons why you should do it, and then I'm going to go over a couple useful tips. So before I hop into the DAW, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hang out here for a moment, and we'll just kind of talk about different reasons why you should consider to mix in mono. So we'll hang out here in the studio for a moment. And one little tip that I do want to give, if you're capable of it, I know not everybody is, but if you do have the capability of it, if you mix in mono, and also while you're doing that, mix on some like really kind of boxy, smaller speakers. Like one that I really like is, I use them here when I'm at this smaller studio or when I'm at my home studio. It's these Ableton mix cubes. Auratone makes the original cube, I believe, so that's also another one to go by. You can just really hear things. It really boosts things in the mid-range, makes it sound more consumer. So if you're mixing in mono and you're mixing on cubes at the same time, you can get it to sound good on that, chances are it's going to sound good on most systems. Now, I do know that Mix by Ali and a lot of other really high-end engineers go a step further, and instead of collapsing their DAW or their interface to mono, what they do is they actually just set up one of their cubes and have it come right down the middle. So instead of collapsing it to mono, they're getting true mono. They have it just coming out of one cube alone. I haven't gone that far yet, but it's definitely something that I should probably consider eventually, because I've heard that when you do that, it can really give you something just more obvious. What I do is, personally, I collapse to mono on my interface at home. I use an Apollo Twin, and that has a mono button on there. When I'm at this studio, this monitor station right here allows me to collapse to mono. When I'm in bigger studios with like SSL consoles or Tridents, they have the console has a mono switch right on it that I can collapse to mono. But if you don't have any of that, most DAWs have a plugin that allows you to collapse it to mono. You just throw it on your master channel. So what I'm gonna do when we go into the DAW is I'll actually show you in most of the DAWs, I'll show you individually what plugin allows you to do that. And then also there's another one that I like even better than the stock DAWs. It's a free plugin. It's by Boz Digital Labs. It's called Peninsula. It's definitely worth checking out. It is free, so I mean, you might as well throw that in your arsenal. It doesn't take up a lot of space on your computer. I'll actually put the link in the description for that so you know where to get that. But there's just a couple little extra capabilities, and when we're inside the DAW, you'll see why. That's a good reason to. So a couple things that I want to go over of why you should mix in mono before we hop in the DAW is, one thing to consider is a lot of times the listener, the consumer, who's not a mix engineer and not a producer and doesn't care about true stereo like we might care about it, they're not really going to hear it in true stereo oftentimes. It's going to be very rare that you see the listener directly, perfectly in between two speakers. They might if they have headphones on, or earbuds or something, but that's a whole different thing. But a lot of times people listen to their music, if it's not in headphones, they listen to it while they're in their car. And so if you think about it, they're going to be more on one side. If they're the driver, they'll be over here. If they're the passenger, they'll be over here. And unless you're sitting dead in the center in the back seat, even if you're in the back seat, you might be in a different area of the speaker, so you're not going to hear it in true stereo. You're going to be closer to one area of the speaker, so you want to make sure that it can translate well in mono, so when they're on different sides of it, it's going to sound good to them and it's going to have a good tonal balance. And then too, if people are listening at home, if they're working in their garage or their kitchen, or they're at work and they're moving around, they're going to be never in the true stereo space of it. They'll be on certain sides of it, they'll be moving around distance wise, they'll be at different angles and distances, so you want to make sure that it translates well on all those speakers, and that when they're not in directly in the middle, that it will sound good. And so mixing in mono kind of helps you with that. Another thing to consider is when people are listening to music on the radio, if your music does hit the radio, and believe it or not, people still do listen to the radio. I know streaming right now is king, but if your songs do make it to the radio, you want to consider that FM stations may be stereo, but when the signal gets weaker, it actually collapses to mono. So you do want to make sure that, just in case that your music ever lands in that situation, that if it's lands in mono, it's definitely gonna want to translate well. And there's quite a bit of times when people are driving and they're listening to FM that it's going in and out of mono and stereo, because as they're driving different distances, the signal strengthens and weakens throughout. So those are just a couple reasons why you should consider to mix in mono as far as outside situations that you can't control. And then for other reasons to mix in mono, the main reason why I really swear by mixing in mono is when you're mixing in mono, a lot of the EQ decisions and a lot of the where frequencies are fighting are a lot more obvious. And it is hard to mix in mono. It can be. But that's the point. It's definitely, it's harder, because when you're mixing in stereo, things get masked and problems start to hide a little bit easier. And so when you're mixing in mono, it's a lot more difficult to get it to sound good. And because you can really hear problems that are fighting, especially with like the low end. You got your kick, your bass, or your 808 going on. And if you can get that to really sit well on mono, it's going to really translate well in a lot of different speakers and situations. And that's actually the really big key to getting your low end to sound good, is mixing it in mono. And then too, because you'll be able to just sculpt it and things will be a lot more obvious. Too, another thing too is your levels will be a lot more obvious too, of what should be balanced and what should be raised or lowered. And then your ability to hear how your compressor's working too will be a lot more obvious when you're mixing in mono. You'll be able to hear what it's really doing, especially what it's doing on the attack. You'll be able to hear what it's doing on those initial transients as well. And the big thing that I really love about mixing in mono, and one of the main reasons why I do it, is because when you mix in mono, you can really hear when things are distorting and creating that harsh kind of frequency fighting that you hear on speakers sometimes, like cheaper speakers or Bluetooth speakers. It's another example of when people will be listening to songs in mono, is most Bluetooth speakers are actually mono. Even if they have two speakers on it, it's actually a mono image and it's not a true stereo image. So that's another thing to consider. But you'll be able to hear what's causing that either harsh distortion or that frequency clash when you're mixing in mono, and you can really get that balance in there, and it can really save a mix if you can get it to sound good on that. And what's really awesome is when you finally come out of mono and you're listening to it in stereo, you'll find that you don't have to make too many adjustments. You'll still have to make some adjustments because there are some things to consider and stuff when you are mixing in stereo, but you'll see that there's not a lot left for you to do, and that things are going to actually sound really good. And so those are just a couple reasons why you should consider it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into the DAW, and I'm just going to go over a couple different tips and tricks and different EQ decisions and stuff to consider while mixing in mono. And we'll also go through different DAWs and show you how you can mix down to mono in there as well. All right, let's dive in. So I got Pro Tools open up here. But as I always say, these tips and techniques will work in any DAW, and you're about to see that too in a moment. I'm going to show you how to do this in each DAW. Just in case you don't have an interface that allows you to flip to mono, you at least know what the stock plugins are in each DAW. So if you're working in Pro Tools, one thing that you could do is just create a mono master fader. Problem with that though is when you do pan, you will be hearing the things pan. Another way to do it is if you sum all your stuff to a stereo aux input, what you can then do is go to the Avid folder and you want to throw down mixer on there, and that will allow everything to be in mono, but you'd have to route everything to the down mixer. And so now I'll go ahead and I'll show you in the different DAWs how you'd be able to do mixing in mono using the stock plugins in those DAWs. All right, and if you're using Ableton and you want to be able to mix in mono, what you got to do is you want to hit up your master section, and then you're going to want to go to audio effects. You want to go down to utility, and then you just want to hit this little one right here called mono. Throw it on your master channel there, and then just engage mono, and then you're good to go for mixing in mono when you're in Ableton. So if you're using Logic and you want to mix in mono, you just go to utility, go to gain, and then once you're there, you can engage this right here, mono, and now you're mixing in mono. All right, so if you're using Reason and you want to be able to mix down in mono, it is a bit of a workaround. This is the only way that I know how to do it in Reason. If there is a way to do it easier and you know how to do it, feel free to put it down in the comment section below for other people to know how to use that a little bit easier. But from my knowledge, what you got to do is you got to set it up yourself. So in the master section, you want to go to your inserts here. So we got our master section, so we'll show the programmer, show the insert effects, and then you want to go to the studio effects, M-Class stereo imager, and then you want to get it to where you can switch this button right here. So just name that mono, and then you want to select that, hit button 1, and then you want to hit the low width, and then go to, again, same thing, button 1, hit the high width here, and then you want to set this to the minimum. You want to set to 0 here, and then the max you want to set to -64, and then that way when you engage the mono button here in your master section, you can see right down here that it's going to flip everything to mono right there. So that's how you would do that in Reason. All right, so now I'm back in Pro Tools. The only big DAW that I don't have is FL Studio, and so I can't show you visually how to do that, but from my understanding, if you're using FL Studio and you want to mix in mono in there, you just got to go to the master channel, turn the stereo separation knob fully clockwise until it says 100% merged, and then you'll be mixing in mono while you're in FL Studio. So those are all the stock plugins. What I recommend is if you don't have the capability of doing mono on your interface, there is actually a free plugin, and I have the link in the description below. It's by DAWs Digital Labs, and it's called Peninsula. And what I really like about it is not only is it free and it doesn't take up a lot of space on the computer and it lets me flip into mono, but it's got a couple little extra things that I kind of like too. We saw these in the other stock plugins too, as far as how you can flip the phase, which is cool. But I also like too that you can flip the left and right channel, so then you can flip the stereo image around. So it's pretty cool, pretty useful too. So this is a song in particular that I definitely spent a lot of time mixing in mono. It's a pop song. I wanted to make sure that this song translated very well on a lot of different speakers. So I'll kind of show you what we got here, and then I'll just talk about the things that I did while mixing in mono.
Spin faster, ball harder, feel me as I feel you. Move slowly, fall quickly. I feel you. Breathe softly, breathe louder.
Right, so a fairly clean mix here, and so I'll flip the mono and show you what things were sounding like as I was mixing in there.
Spin faster, ball harder, feel me as I feel you. Move slowly, fall quickly. I feel you. Breathe softly.
Yeah, so you can see I'm not really losing too much when I flip to mono, and that's because like I said, I spent quite a bit of time while mixing in mono, and the big thing that I spent quite a bit of time doing was the kick and the bass here. So these were quite a lot of decisions here that I made while mixing in mono. A lot of times, if I was just mixing in stereo, I wouldn't have did a lot of these EQ cuts because I wouldn't have heard them. It wouldn't have been so apparent to me. But the big thing even before that was levels. I remember when I was mixing in mono, I had the levels a little bit different here. So when I'm in stereo, it's not quite as apparent. And then two, I'll show you. Right, so it just kind of things stuck out a little bit, and I'm going to give you a little tip that I do. This is not a pro tip, so, do not take these words as gospel. This is just a realistic productions tip, something that I do, and I'm sure there are some engineers that have been doing this for 30 or 50 years that will swear that what I'm going to tell you right now is no good, but hey, it helps for me, and it's always something that I can definitely rely on. And so what I do is I will throw on my limiters that I have going on here. Like, I won't mix completely in the entire time like this, but what I'll do is I'll have this on so I can gauge to see what's going to distort when I'm in mono, and so this helps me quite a bit actually, because a lot of times I'm able to then tell what's going to distort and stuff, but when it's at that high volume. And it's just something that I do as a quick check, and then what I do then is I'll adjust it. So watch your ears, it will get a little louder now that the limiter's on. So now that I'm in mono, things distort a little bit more now that I had the levels where they were initially, and then I took off all my inserts there. So let me put the levels back here, pop in what I did here. So that really let me tell that I was able to fix some things. And so what you do there is you just want to like kind of get those levels right before you really go in and on a lot of EQs. See, when I'm in mono, I'm able to tell that the bass is a lot louder than it probably needed to be. Right, and then we put on our EQs and everything. And it let me see that I was able to really just scope in certain pockets and stuff for it. So that's definitely one reason why you want to mix in mono, is that gain staging and the EQs. And then another reason is it's a really obvious one, to make sure that you're not having any phase cancellation. And so might not always be so apparent when you're mixing in stereo, but when you're mixing in mono, it'll definitely be a lot more apparent. So you want to make sure that you're not losing things when you flip to mono when you're in stereo, because a lot of time when we're using stereo tools, I'll just go to this lead over here. And now on this particular one, I didn't add any stereo tools, but sometimes what you'll have is if you throw on something to make it more stereo, such as like Micro Shift by Soundtoys, or any one of the Waves plugins. See, that's got a lot wider. If I flip to mono, we lose a little bit versus if I take it out. See that, things really got thin when we flipped to mono. Now, granted, you usually wouldn't just throw this on 100% wet. This is definitely an exaggeration. It's just something to consider. If you want to know more about phase cancellation, I actually have a tutorial that's completely dedicated to phase cancellation and how it works and what to look out for and how you can avoid it and what you can do to fix it if you do run into it. So I'm actually not going to go too much into detail. Feel free to check that out if you are interested in it. And then another thing too is when you're automating the vocals, or if you're automating the song, it helps a lot to, when you mix it in mono, you can really hear those levels just a lot better actually. So what I usually do when I'm in Pro Tools is I just throw a VCA meter on here, and then I tell it to control the, like, if I'm gonna do the lead vocals. And the reason why I do that is when you use automation, if you throw on automation, right, and stuff, and you got that automated, what you can't do is you can't adjust the levels later. See that it jumps back to it. And so what I do is I'll use a VCA meter instead, because that allows me to control the automation. As you see, I'm able to automate that right there. But what's really cool about it is if the artist or something is like, hey, like, sounds great, but can you just turn my vocals up? Well, if I've already did automation on the vocals, I can't just turn that up. I'd have to like go and use a plugin or something to turn it up. So it's just a little bit easier this way. But anyways, going back onto the topic, when you're doing automation, it's just a lot more apparent when you're in mono here.
I want you to want me, want you to show me how it's complicated, you're so fat, you all night long. This should be simple in this instant, you're the only one.
Versus if we're in stereo.
Instant, you're the only one. This should be quicker in my lifetime.
See, some of that stuff isn't quite as obvious. I mean, there's obviously points where it's like pretty obvious and like, hey, I definitely need to turn that part down.
Instant, you're the only one. This should be.
But yeah, there are just a little bit more obvious points in there. And so when you're mixing in mono, it just makes it a little bit easier to make those decisions.
This instant, you're the only one. This should be quicker in.
So yeah, it just helps you achieve more accurate volume automation. And then just the last point that I want to make about mixing in mono that I think is really cool is you'll find that when you're mixing in mono, you can rely on your ears a little bit more, and that you'll find that you don't have the volume quite as loud as you would when you're in stereo. And so in turn, that actually creates less ear fatigue and just makes it a little bit easier on your ears and just better overall health for your ears to help you prolong this career in mixing and music a lot longer. So hopefully this helped a lot. I know this was pretty detailed and a lot of information, but I wanted to really go in on this one and really just give a lot of detail on mixing in mono, try to separate what's already out there, and then just try to really fully educate you on there. So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there was some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man SoundOracle everywhere at SoundOracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to SoundOracle.net. Alright, till next time.